Hi everyone and welcome to this webinar. Today we're looking at updates to Benchmark and a recent report that Benchmark have done into homeowner attitudes about their heating systems. If you've got any questions for the team as we go, there's the comment section here to the right. Feel free to use that as much as you like. And we also have the ask a question button underneath. That's a bit easier for us to keep track of. It's more like a Facebook, LinkedIn Q&A. So as we go, if you've got any comments or queries, we'll be able to answer them as we go. So let's introduce you to our panelists. First up, we've got Chris Jessup. Chris, how are you?
Good morning and thanks. Yes, I'm Chris Jessup. I'm the chair of the Benchmark steering committee. Work for Idle Boilers. I've been involved in the industry for 31 years now.
Perfect, thanks for joining us. And Neil Watson. Neil, thank you.
Hello, Joe. I'm Neil Watson, Chief Technical Officer for AD Innovation. I also work with Chris on the Benchmark committee. I represent water treatment on that committee, and I've been in the industry for 18 years.
Perfect. And we've got Billy Wilger. Billy, thanks for joining us.
No problem. I am the owner and CEO and founder of a plumbing and heating, domestic plumbing and heating business. I've been working with the Benchmark Steering Committee for 14 years, since its inception in actual fact. And that's my background. I've been in the heating industry for, sadly, 36 years.
And we've got Lincoln Smith. Lincoln, how are you?
Hi, Joe. Yeah, sorry, I think my connection's a bit poor, but I think I'm back. Yeah, so I'm Lincoln Smith. I'm a director at a company called Custom Heat. We're based near Coventry, Rugby in the Midlands. And we've been invited today to give a more of an installer view as to sort of the things you're asking, the questions you're asking. So yeah, looking forward to it.
No, perfect. Thanks a lot for giving us your time, everyone. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. And don't forget, if you do have any questions or comments as we go, please feel free to type them in the chat and the ask a question box. So we've got some questions here to go through. I think we'll aim the first one at Billy, if that's all right. So Billy, what's the role of the modern day heating engineer in 2020 as we go into 2021?
Well, it's changed dramatically, I'd say, in the last 10 years. 10 years ago, we would be the people who would recommend certain products, certain methods, and we would really be the guide to the consumer. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending which way you look at it, the internet has now opened up that. So consumers now really are very much more educated when we get there. So that it's our role to guide them in best practice. It used to be to guide them in product, but that's, as I said, changed dramatically. So we tend to guide them on best practice, how the job should be done, and indeed, as this is largely refers to, how they should look after the appliance after it's been installed.
Yeah, Lincoln, do you find that more recently, like customers are doing their own kind of research, so they're kind of recommending to you what products they want, and that might not be the most informed decision?
Yeah, I mean, just sort of echo what Billy said. Really, a lot of quotes we find now are all consumer led. You know, years ago, I was quoting, started quoting just over 10 years ago myself after coming off the road, and I always used to find it was very much driven out of a brochure, and you used to be able to lead customers down a path, but we are finding more and more that the consumers are coming to us almost with a package in their mind of what they're looking to have. The boilers in, down to the filters, the controls, and they've got a lot more information to hand with Google and with YouTube and places they can go and do their research and sit and watch tutorials and videos. So yeah, I mean, the whole thing really has changed quite significantly, especially over the last 5 years. I mean, I've been quoting only the last 10, so prior to that, I guess the change is more significant than what I've seen. So yeah, definitely.
But despite that, the kind of report that Benchmark have just done, only, I believe it's 55% of people, 55.7% of people said they had their boiler serviced, get their boiler serviced every year. So what do we think is kind of is the blocker for the other kind of half of the people? Why aren't they doing this regularly?
Well, in my opinion, it's largely down to the installer, and there's a split on the installer database, if you like. Some installers will go in there, they just install. They want to install, fit a boiler, go next day, fit a boiler, next day, fit a boiler. That's what they do. Other installers, and that's where we're lacking, there's not enough of them, will continue that relationship with a customer and look to service it. So it's largely those guys who aren't really realizing the potential of not only more revenue by servicing it every year, but also continuing that relationship with a customer, whereby in 15 years, roughly 15 years of what you expect of a good appliance today, they're going to get another install.
And Neil, what about things like water treatment? Is this something that that homeowners are kind of more aware of, or is there still a bit of what is this, and how do we as an industry and how do installers help to raise this awareness of best practice?
Yeah, I think there's absolutely an education issue, but it's something that we need to pick up from the manufacturers, from industry, to initially educate the installer in the benefits of water treatment so that they can really educate the end user as well. And it becomes really, really important because when you look at the latest 10-point plan that the government has put out, and the fact that we're trying to reduce carbon down to very low levels by 2050, and correct water treatment has a massive influence on that. So it's not just about replacing technology with new technology. We absolutely need to make sure that the condensing boilers that we're using today are operating as efficiently as possible, as efficiently as they were designed. And Benchmark actually drives that practice.
Yeah, Chris, your background's with Idea Boilers, so a boiler manufacturer. So how important is it for you guys that the kit that's going in is as efficient as it can be, is working so you don't get callbacks? How important is that for you?
It's absolutely critical that the kit is looked after and maintained correctly and installed correctly, and as Neil's said, having the correct water treatment. The boilers have become incredibly efficient, and to do so, they've become a lot more technically advanced than the traditional boilers ever were, and as such, ensuring that you maintain that optimal level of performance is absolutely critical. The issue, as Billy mentioned earlier on, is a lot of homeowners actually seem to forget they've actually got a boiler until it fills, and we need to make sure that we educate people through there. The other factor I've always said is the boiler is the one piece of intelligent equipment within the system. So it is the one that will always kind of flag up any issues around the system. So ensuring that it is correctly looked after and correctly maintained ensures that product will continue to operate correctly. And it's like any other item that you have. If you neglect it, it's far more likely to fail, and it's always the case that it will do so when you most require it.
Yeah, which is very apt as we go into the heating system. So, Chris, if we stay with you, how are Benchmark helping? How is industry helping get these messages across to installers and homeowners about the health of their system, what they should do, what kind of products they should look at?
Well, Benchmark is a great example of this, and it does drive the best practices through there. We've also introduced within the Benchmark program, so we've put some best practice guides together for key elements such as condensates, and also water treatment, and correct servicing and what you should expect when you have your boiler servicing. As part of the Benchmark program, we're also looking to roll this out with a consumer app that will follow the installer app, which is designed about ensuring people are more aware and do pick up the right level of information that they need to ensure that they're well informed and making the best use of the equipment that they've got, so that it becomes reliable and as efficient and optimal as it can be for them.
Yeah, Lincoln, from your kind of experience, when you go into people's homes and you talk people through their heating systems, how do you communicate these kind of messages like, oh, this is why you should have water treatment, this is why you should have a magnetic filter, this is why we should do this, this is why we should do this?
So we always talk about the boiler servicing and the cleaning of the system in a sense from the guarantee point of view. So the customers understand that if they don't have the ongoing servicing or they don't have the system flushed correctly, the guarantees may well, be an issue. I mean, my thoughts with the boiler manufacturers and AD. I mean, do the boiler manufacturers going to worry, if boilers, their systems are squeaky clean and they're serviced every year? I mean, some manufacturers lean on the fact that these things haven't been done, so they don't go out under the guarantee. So the manufacturers sort of can be a bit concerned that you know, these squeaky clean systems and these boilers all prim and proper, is it going to, you know, sort of lead to them causing them issues there? And, you know, from an installer's point of view, you know, we do flush the systems to ensure the guarantees. You know, is what we say to our customers, and we do send reminders out prior that says in it to, you know, keep your guarantee live and active. You should have your boiler serviced annually. You know, very little is really said about the efficiency side of things, which maybe could be a good thing, is to maybe draw on not only it being from a safety point of view, the servicing, but also ensuring the system's working optimally and, you know, and efficiently. So that's what we would say on a you know, when we're talking to customers about new boilers and new systems.
And then, what are you doing this by, like texting customers, WhatsApping customers, phoning customers, leave behinds, little stickers, or kind of all of the above?
Well, in a sense, when we're quoting, we're face to face having those kind of discussions. But a year on after the appliance is fitted, we're sending out email or text reminders with a link onto book. So yeah, it's all done through an automated system, through a CRM system. I mean, having something like that in place is dramatically increased, you know, the amount of repeat servicing that we find we get, and the need from the customer to then want to book in. So yeah, having a, you know, an online system that caters for that is what we're using, and it works very, very well. So
yeah, Billy, if we talk about your heating and plumbing company, how do you go about that process about trying to get customers to get their boiler serviced, and why do you think that like 50 or just less than 50% of people still aren't doing that every year?
Like Lincoln, we use a CRM, an online CRM system, and yeah, texting customers. Yeah, it's just educating the consumer. That's the big thing. If you can educate the consumer, as Chris referred to earlier, the warranty, it's critical that they understand that if the boiler is the warranty is going to be maintained, it has to be installed properly, it has to be commissioned properly, and very importantly, it has to be cleaned properly. So the water treatment side is a critical part of any installation. Lincoln quite rightly said, and I agree with him, you do 95% of that education at the point of survey. Once you leave that door, yeah, you can leave literature and brochures and all the rest of it, but you've done your bit at the point of sale, really. And very often we use the fact that we do the servicing, that we do sometimes an extended warranty based on how clean the water is, how we commission it, how we look after them. It's a selling point. It's a good point. And it educates the consumer to avoid the guys who aren't doing the power flush in this instance, or the commissioning properly. So that's where the benchmark really hopefully come into its own, because it's got the support of the manufacturers to give it some teeth.
Neil, talking about water treatment, it's not just like Lincoln said, it's not just the kind of money saving, but it's also the carbon saving. And you know, we think, and it seems that customers are kind of more aware of the environment and want systems that are better to release less carbon dioxide and things like that. So how is the latest kind of regulations with water treatment? How is this helping the industry?
It's really important, a very important point that you've raised, that there have been some changes to best practice, and in particular for BS 7593. That was revised in 2019, and these are being written into the new Part L of building regulations. One way to make sure that you comply with building regulations is to follow benchmark. So by having a digital benchmark app, this flags up to you all of the requirements that you need to do as part of BS 7593 to be compliant with Part L of building regulations. So that requires you to not only clean and install an inhibitor at the point that you install the system, but you now need to be checking the system every year, making sure that the system is clean every year and your inhibitor is topped up. And really importantly, that you have a filter fitted to the system, regardless of whether that's a new system or an existing system. That's now a requirement within BS 7593. And it's not just done to try to boost sales of product manufacturers. It's absolutely done because of the efficiency savings that you can make by correctly treating a system. So, for example, you can save you get 15% system efficiency losses due to having sludge in your system. And if you look at that in terms of carbon equivalence, that costs every homeowner, if your system isn't treated correctly, 250 kilograms of carbon equivalents per year. That's the equivalent to a modern car driving 2,630 kilometers. So they're really, really significant efficiency savings that you can make. And of course, efficiency savings roll down to cost savings for the end customer. And it's estimated that a customer can save £80 a year, every year, by having best practice water treatment, which is simply by following the requirements laid out within the benchmark app.
And Neil, if an installer doesn't do this, doesn't fit a magnetic filter and doesn't put an inhibitor in the system and all that sort of stuff, what happens? What's the kind of the stick? So the carrot is it will save you all of this. What's the stick?
I guess the stick is that the warranty for the boiler is unlikely to be maintained. The really important thing with benchmark is that it's based around the system and not just around the boiler. You need to have an efficient system. The boiler takes the blame for anything that goes wrong, but it's generally the system that falls over before the boiler falls over. So the reality is it's not going to be policed. Therefore, there is an acceptance that the installer themselves take responsibility for doing this. Benchmark is really good for putting this in front of the installer's face when they're in front of the customer. So it also helps level out that playing field where you've got some installers taking off water treatment, taking off filters to get a better quote. If all of the installers are following benchmark, that's completely a level playing field now.
Yeah, Chris, you mentioned the benchmark app for installers and the benchmark app for end users. So could you just give us a bit of background about those, please?
Absolutely. Yeah, as it suggested, the installer app is designed for the installer to be able to firstly register and complete the benchmark certification from there, which does include the water treatment elements within there, as well as ongoing. It becomes a service history, a bit like the MOT on your car, where you can now look online and see when it was last MOT'd by each year, and to give the basic information that relates to that service regime. From the customer angle, it gives them basic information that the boiler has been serviced, when it's due, any general push messages. As Lincoln and Billy have both said, they rely upon communication means to ensure that customers are reminded through the consumer app with consent from the consumers. We will push those messages out for Billy and Lincoln to their customers that remind them that the boiler needs servicing, so that it does bring the consumer up to speed with the system. And as well, just picking up on what Billy said with regards, Billy and what Neil said as well, with regards generating a quote for a system. What the app will do is give them a greater informed view of life, so that the quotes should be done with best practice in the consumers, looking it through the consumer's eyes, that actually saving a few pounds here and there on an installation actually will cost you money in the long run, and could lead to issues with your warranty and reducing the lifespan on your boiler. So it does become a false economy and costs you more to actually achieve the same level of heating.
Yeah, Lincoln, this app idea, this digitization of benchmark, how good do you think it will be for your day-to-day job?
Well, I need to sort of see it really first, but from what it sounds like, from what Chris has said, if it's a central point like the MOTs where consumers can go on and check when their appliance was last serviced, and it puts an onus on when you're selling a property, perhaps somebody can go on and actually have a look and see what the service history of a boiler and things like that would be very, very useful. Get a bit more transparency. So yeah, I mean, obviously everything's going digital now, so to have it in a digital app is good. I assume it's just installer led, so the installer has to put the information in. It's not down to a consumer to download an app. I'm assuming that's right. So yeah, and I guess tied in with that is sort of with AD with their water treatment. I guess with the water treatment side of things, the good guys will still do it, and the installers that don't care still won't. You know, until it's that kind of stuff's policed. It's, you know, it's just going to cost the good guys more money, and the people that don't care, there'll be no different off. So yeah, hopefully it's good to see that Benchmark's going digital. It's good to see that things are moving more into, you know, up with modern days, and it should be easier from our point of view. I don't know how it will affect us in the office in terms of the actual, can we go on and can we see it as an installer? It'd be good if our engineers all had the app and they could go on and log all these things and we can check it on a central hub and things like that. I mean, I don't know. We maybe need a bit more information from Chris or from Neil on that.
Yeah, Billy, or Chris or Neil, can anyone give us a bit of how it works and the kind of the history behind this? Because we've been talking about MOTs for heating systems, and we've been talking about digitalisation of everything for quite a while. So how do we get to this point now?
Yeah, I think if I pick up first, and then the other guys can chip in if I miss anything out. But the benchmark form's always existed for a long time within the manual since the inception of the actual benchmark scheme. So what we've actually done is lifted up the paper-based forms for the benchmark and created that with some smart fields within there, so that it will only ask relevant questions to that type of boiler. So if you put in a system boiler or a heat-only boiler, it won't ask you the questions around that it would on a combi boiler, for example. The whole thing is designed to be simple. It's designed to actually take less time to fill in than the paper-based form. So it is entirely just been created as something that should be easy to adopt by installers. To answer Lincoln's question, it's a simple app that will be launched that will be available to all engineers just to download on there. It's available, or will be available, for iOS and Android. We're also working on some further developments which will allow what's called an API access to larger installers, but you know, we want to start and get it out there in its simplest format first. So this will then drive the simple questions straight through on a smartphone. It will scan barcodes or QR codes, and we're also looking at the potential for geolocation on there as well to pick up the address where the boiler is installed from. We've tried to make it as simple as possible and as easy as possible for an installer to fill this in. And the challenge is that there's a significant time-saving and simpler approach to actually filling this in, but actually providing more functional-rich information.
I think what's critical as well, to add to what Chris is saying, is we're actually digitising an existing process, but very importantly, the data is now being shared. So whereas beforehand it was a piece of paper, manufacturers never knew if that boiler had been commissioned properly, had been cleaned properly, did it have a filter fitted, was the gas reading correct, etc., etc. Now with this being digital, that data is shared, and the manufacturers, and this is a good thing, all manufacturers are buying into this. The manufacturers will now be able to see at a glance from their service departments that the boiler was fitted and commissioned properly or not, as the case may be. And the real benefit of that is that if the case is not, the public, it'll be very much a drip feed, but the consumer will eventually realize that having it done right is the way forward. So it should, in theory, with the support of the whole industry, get rid of these cowboys, get rid of the guys who just aren't doing it properly, because eventually the consumer will become aware. Maybe a painful journey for some of them, but I think it will give the industry a far better place in the next 5, maybe even 10 years. But you know what? In the big picture, that's not that long a time.
For me, it's really important to go digital. Everybody's going digital now. It's what the consumer expects. Just to be clear, we have 2 apps that are under development. The app for the installer is completely separate from the app for the consumer. So the installer app will be out before the consumer app is. the other thing that's really important for me on the installer app is that the installer can't skip steps. So when it comes to the point of saying, have you cleaned this system correctly? What cleaner have you used? Have you installed, have you inhibited it? What inhibitor have you used? What filter have you fitted? He needs to answer those questions before he moves on to the next part of the installation. So this is why I really believe that this will level up the playing field and make sure that everybody starts to install and service systems correctly.
Yeah, Lincoln, when you fill out your benchmark form now, do you give it to the homeowner and then it just goes into that drawer where the magic drawer where it never sees the light of day again?
Yeah, quite likely, until the service engineer comes, asks for it, and it's again it's not seen. But yeah, I mean the one idea, one thing when Neil was talking is whether, because it's all well and good on forms putting yes no and just writing in any old woof to make it look like you filled it out properly. Anybody could do that. Is whether this app has got the ability to add evidence, a photo. Have you power flushed it? Yeah, there's a picture of the flushing machine. If you gas rated it, yeah, there's your gas. Sort of an evidence base so that there's a bit of a trail behind it. And you know, because at the minute you get a benchmark, but you just literally put what you like in it, and then it looks great, and the readings are what they're meant to be because you know them, because you know what they should be. But there's nothing there to say, well, actually that has been done like that. You know, you said, oh, on the manufacturer will know. He'll look onto this database and say, oh yeah, look, the readings were all right. Well, yeah, were they? You know, so I mean, an evidence thing on that would be ideal, especially for us. You know, with the engineers that we've got. And an auditing purpose, so we can say, well, here's the benchmark for these properties, and here's the photos to evidence those figures, because that's quite an important thing, I think.
Yeah, just picking up on that, Lincoln, that it is a very valid point, and it is an element we are looking to build into the app. The app, I do see, will evolve. We're already, as much as we're very close to releasing the initial version, we are also already looking at what's coming after that. There's two elements we're looking at. Adding things like photographs in is fine, but we're also looking, again, as I said, we want to make things very, very simple, and we are looking to whether we can actually link to your flue gas analyzer via Bluetooth, so that we can actually pull the reading straight across, so that you then wouldn't have to enter them. It would just pull that information across, so that the evidence that you're looking for, again, we're trying to make that as effortless as we can for installers to actually add in there. But the option to add photographs is something that you know, is something that is on the roadmap for the apps.
Yeah, and there already is a requirement within the app to record what method you've used for testing the level of inhibitor within the system. And again, there are water treatment apps either on the market or under development at the moment that can link directly into the benchmark app in the future.
Touching on that point, the kind of the landscape of the industry and the way that technology moves so quickly means that there's and we're kind of at a crossroads with things like net zero targets and all that. So there's new stuff coming through all the time. How is the app going to incorporate these emerging technologies going forward?
We focused initially on the gas boiler, because that currently is the major source of heating across the UK. However, we already do have benchmark forms for renewable technologies, which we are going to refine. They will be added to the app ongoing. As I said, the app is not just here's benchmark and that's it. It's been an evolution since the whole benchmark scheme started. This won't stop. The new technologies will be added onto there, and it will allow for that migration from one technology to another, or to a hybrid environment, and then onto new technologies over time. So it's absolutely key that this becomes the standard for the emerging technologies, and supports the focus to become carbon neutral.
I suppose the beauty of it is once installers have it downloaded, it'll update itself automatically. So when there is
Exactly. Yeah.
things, and you'll get a push notification, say, well, this is all new, and you can add this and all that sort of stuff.
Absolutely correct. Yeah. And again, we want to keep the same kind of look and feel and ethos around filling the benchmarking, whether it's a gas boiler or a heat pump or a hybrid system.
And Billy, you mentioned that you've kind of been working with Benchmark for, did you say 14 years? So kind of how big a step forward is this for you? This must have been something that 14 years ago you'd have thought, well, that would be ideal.
Yeah, I mean, the principle has stayed the same for the whole 14 years. It's improving the industry, it's improving the journey for the consumer, and ultimately for the manufacturer, and of course the installer. So for me, this is coming to the head. It's fantastic. When we started this journey all those years ago, there was no such thing as an app. It was just trying to give the consumer a bit of an education, and that has become a lot easier because of digitization. As I said, we use electronic CRM. It's interesting, about 50% or 55% you said they don't take up servicing. But again, if you have that education, that can be anything up to 90%. So if we can get the message across to the installers who aren't doing service work, that it's a fantastic revenue stream that they're missing out on, as well as improving the installation and the journey for all parties.
So for installers who are watching this and want more information, want to find out more, want to find out how the app works and how they can build it into their offering, where do they go? What's the best way to kind of get some more information?
We're just in the final throes of completing the installer app. We're due to have that launched by the end of this year. We will be putting further information out in the press across the trade, as well as ensuring through the Benchmark website that there will be further updates on there. But I would keep an eye out towards the end of the year for the Benchmark app in either the App Store or the Google Play Store, because it will be there. But we will ensure that the messaging is sent out there so that people are aware of its launch. So we have a target launch currently of the 22nd of December, but that's subject to some final testing and tweaking going through. So it's very, very close indeed, and very exciting. That we have had a small number of installers that have been involved in the part of our program to actually give feedback on the beta version of it, which has largely gone very, very well. But like I say, we just in the final throes now of getting this ready for the initial launch.
Lincoln, put your hand up.
Just in a question that some installers may have, possibly for Chris, which there was a few years ago, I think, if I'm not mistaken, that GasSafe actually marketed to a load of, because you register the boilers with them, they know when the services are due. So GasSafe then took it upon themselves. I might be wrong. I seem to remember that a lot of marketing went out to people that held that data. So I guess the question really some installers may ask towards Chris is, that data is going to be quite valuable. There'll be a lot of information there saying when appliances are due a service, and whether ones have or have not been serviced. So the remarketing value is probably quite high. So it's sort of, do you have any long-term intentions with all that data? Because it's probably quite valuable.
Right, it wasn't actually GasSafe, it was the predecessor to GasSafe that undertook some marketing activity. It was Corgi. One thing that's absolutely critical for Benchmark is that this data is secure. The legislation that's in place now is far more rigorous than it was then. We've GDPR has been around now for a few years, as well as Data Protection Act. The whole scheme, for me, rests on its ability to actually be secure, but also drive best practice. So there is no intention that this data becomes something that is mined. It will be held securely, and it will be there to drive those service reminders for the installers that have put them on there that want this. And it's an absolutely critical piece for this. It is not there to mine information for others. Sorry, Billy, do you want?
Well, I was just going to add to that, Chris. There's an opt-in option for those that want to have the service reminder, have the installer data sent to the consumer in, for example, 11 months' time. So that's another way of protecting the data and linking. There is an option for you to say, I would like the details sent to this consumer, my company details, so that they'll contact me for the service. So, I mean, I've been really at the heart of this data protection, as Chris knows only too well. I own a heating business, so I'm, like you, Lincoln, acutely aware of the value of the data. So, I mean, I've tried to ensure, and I think we have done, that our data and our customers are protected, and that we are the first port of call should we wish, and that's the critical bit.
Just to add to that, if you choose not to, that data will not be sold on to other parties.
Mm.
You know, it would be a legitimate interest to the manufacturers just to make sure that they remind people it needs to be done. But the intention is that it would be a more generic message that your boiler needs servicing. If you've opted in, it will be, you know, please contact Lincoln because your boiler requires servicing. It's due for its annual service. And that's the kind of the way we've looked at this.
And an 10-year warranty, of course.
Yes. Yeah. You know, if there was any risk of it becoming or perceived to be anything of a marketing tool, and I don't think we would get the adoption that we so require for this. And that's why we've spent an awful lot of time ensuring that data is secure. And the partner who's building the app for us, that was one of the most key critical elements of the actual decision to choose that partner.
So another question is, have any boiler manufacturers got a hand in on the app? Is anybody involved from a manufacturer's point of view?
From each of the core manufacturers as part of the actual scheme, they will have access to the data that's relevant to their product, so that the warranty registration piece can also be done. So again, it provides an input into there so that they can actually ensure that the warranty is recorded on the system and that the information is there.
Sorry, just one other question, possibly for Neil, is that the app was, you mentioned that the app was a step you can't move on without filling in certain parts. Will it get to parts about flushing and sort of, I guess, AD's part of the app, which asks about the flushing side and what's been done with it? Because a lot of it's to a British standard, as opposed to, some people say a power flush, some people say a manually flush system. And there's a stigma between the two. You know, the proper people do the power flushing, the people that don't care do the manual flushing. It's what some people may say. So what's AD's part in it? What, can you, if you fill in that you've done a manual flush, does it flag up that it's not a proper install? You know, you said that manufacturers could look at it. And...
Okay, there's a couple of questions, a couple of points in there. AD are involved in this just simply from the point that I chair the benchmark water treatment group within HHIC. So consequently, I sit on the HHIC committee together with Chris. So AD per se are not steering this for water treatment or anything else. I represent all of the water treatment manufacturers on that regardless. So that's point number one. It's not that detailed, to be honest, Lincoln. It asks the question of whether the system has been cleaned and inhibited according to BS 7593 best practice. So it still relies on the installer to use that best practice. And to be honest with you as well, whether or not somebody uses a power flushing equipment or a magnet lens or just a gravity flush, it actually doesn't matter. There is no hierarchy to that within the best practice BS 7593, as long as the system has been cleaned and inhibited correctly. It's the end result that matters, not the methodology for getting there.
Just to add to there, as Neil's part of the group, there are other manufacturers involved as well within there. So it's, you know, the app allows you to choose whichever brand you've chosen. You know, so that we have tried to make sure that everything is agnostic within this.
Also linking to give a little bit more credence to what you're saying about the power flushing, the good guys, whether they power flush or manually flush. I mean, each installation, as you'll be aware as well as that, at AC Wilgar, we do tend to power flush, but you might go into a boiler that's only 6 or 7 years old, a combi boiler, for example, a seal system, and it was already power flushed 6 or 7 years ago, that wouldn't need a full power flush. So it's down, and I'm sure you find this yourself, onto an individual basis. So if it's an old open vented system and it's 25 years old, and you're going to put a new combi on that system or a system boiler, clearly that needs a proper power flush. So each individual install has its own merits, and it's down to you as the surveyor or the installer in a smaller business to determine what's best for that installation. As long as when the job's commissioned, that you're getting the right results, and that's what Benchmark's going to record, regardless of what type of flush you do.
And I think it's also important to note that you, Billy, have been involved in the development of this benchmark as well. So the installer has had a very, very strong voice in the development of benchmark. The other points I wanted to mention is that there is a compliance part to this that's really important, because if you look in Part L of building regulations, the way that you comply for condensing boiler is to follow benchmark. So this makes it much, much easier for an installer to know that their system is compliant with building regulations.
Chris, it's important to stress as well that this is an industry initiative, and lots of different manufacturers are feeding into this, and a lot of installers have fed into this idea as well. So could you just kind of talk about that process for us, please?
Absolutely. As you said, it is an industry-wide initiative right across the whole heating industry. So within the benchmark steering team, we have a number of different manufacturers and installers represented within there. We've also got close links with people like GasSafe and the HSE to ensure that we're meeting all the touch points that are required to ensure that this does drive best practice right across the industry. It's not polarized to any one degree. It is meant to capture the entire industry requirements for best practice of installing a heating system.
Billy, how important is that it's kind of brand agnostic, and it's the kind of the industry itself coming together?
Well, it's critical. It's critical for people to understand that this is not developed by any particular boiler manufacturer or control manufacturer or water treatment company. It is, and it has been for the 14 plus years I've been involved, a generic industry. And Chris has used the term which I really want to emphasize. He used it 3 times in that little clip. Best practice. It's all about best practice. It's all about driving the cowboys out of the industry. It's about keeping companies like Lincoln and their business is growing while they're squeezing the bad guys out. And indeed, my own company, that's the reason I've spent so long doing it. It's about driving best practice, educating the consumer, and as I said earlier on, making the journey a better journey for all parties.
And if installers start using this app and they think there's some functionality they want added, or if there's some more things they want to see, is that something that they can feed back and you can look at getting it built in?
Absolutely, and we would welcome that feedback. Just get in touch with us via the website, the benchmark website, and we will certainly look to include that. As with any app, it will evolve over time, as we spoke around with. We're already looking at the next changes that we want to include within there. But I always believe people using a product will always have the best ideas. And as much as we've gone out to the entire industry to look at what good really looks like and how we make it as simple and effortless as possible, for sure somebody will come up with an absolute stunning idea that we need to capture. So we would most welcome those kind of ideas.
Just to add some emphasis to that as well, one of the key points of benchmark for me is that it's designed to help the installer. It's designed to make the job easier rather than more difficult. It's not putting another layer of bureaucracy on it. It absolutely is designed to help the installer do that job faster and easier. And the fact that Billy has been involved in this for the last 14 years really shows that it's an initiative which where the installer is central within it and not the manufacturer.
No, perfect. Thanks a lot for your time, everyone. That kind of rounds off the session. But Chris, where can people go, just as a final note, to find out more and when it is available to get it downloaded?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Yeah, if you visit the Benchmark website, or also look out on the App Store or Google Play Store, it will be there very shortly.
No, ideal. Thanks a lot, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joe.